Bienvenue à la deuxième moitié de cet après-midi, deuxième moitié du festival de l'USIAS. Welcome back. Nous allons enchaîner avec la présentation de Demian Battaglia, qui va nous parler de neurosciences et de la révolution computationnelle dans les neurosciences. Demian était Fellow de la promotion 2020.
Merci Monica pour l'introduction et l'invitation. Alors, je vais parler, on m'a demandé de parler en anglais pour l'équilibre entre les présentations, mais de toute façon, je vais parler en italien, parce que j'ai le même accent que je parle en français ou en anglais. Et voilà, bon, le titre a changé un tout petit peu, mais parce qu'en fait, je pensais que c'était intéressant de vous parler de mon projet quand j'étais fellow à l'USIAS, mais ça date déjà de quelques années. Et donc aussi de vous parler aussi des évolutions que ce projet a eues, notamment avec mon aménagement définitif à Strasbourg et la création d'une nouvelle équipe. Voilà, donc voilà, je suis effectivement spécialiste en neurosciences computationnelles, physicien de formation, avec une thèse à l'interface avec l'informatique. Et depuis, je m'occupe de neurobiologie. Donc je vais commencer par définir la nature de ma spécialité, les neurosciences computationnelles en fait. Hop, voilà. Donc, c'est quoi? Oh, I told in English. Okay, so then switch in English. Sorry. Yeah. So, what is computational neuroscience? Computational neuroscience is an interface discipline. And actually, it constitutes in the utilization of physical, mathematical, and computer science modeling to answer questions originating in neurobiology and cognitive neuroscience and systems neuroscience. So, it's a relatively little-known discipline, maybe across the spectrum of the various type of neuroscience, but it's not at all a recent discipline. France have the honor of having created the first ever computational neuroscience model with the integrate and fire model of Louis Lepic. And actually, in the 60s and in the 70s, we had David Marr developing models of vision, the emergence of cybernetics and at the interface with neuroscience. Actually, Daniel Amit through the 80s and the 90s developed memory models and so on. So using computational methods to track all different type of directions of exploration in classical neuroscience. And I think it's quite important to remind today we witness the success of artificial intelligence. And computational neuroscience, I told you, is about the study of the real brain, not of the synthetic system. But I think it's important to witness that this kind of fundamental research, fundamental interrogation about the nature of biological intelligence and biological circuits was the primary source of inspiration for nowadays artificial intelligence revolution. And actually, it will still continue to be inspiring the future evolutions of how artificial intelligence systems evolve. More recently, actually, computational neuroscience had some kind of very mediatic milestone reached, such as the simulations of entire parts of the brain of a rodent or even of entire whole brains. Actually, here are some pictures from the Blue Brain project, which consisted in the biophysically detailed simulation of an entire mouse brain. And we start also having the first practical applications. This is not just fundamental science, actually, but today, for instance, we are using computational models of the brain as virtual twins to help informing neurosurgery for the actual benefit and increasing the success chances of surgery in real human patients. Okay, so computational neuroscience, mathematical and physical and computer science modeling of the brain for many possible different directions. So the success of the discipline is even measured by the proliferation of institutions through the world that are dealing with developing computational neuroscience research. So here I'm citing just some. Bernstein Computational Neuroscience Centers in Germany have facilitated the installation and the diffusion of the discipline in Europe. Actually, we have the Swartz Centers for Computational Neuroscience in the USA, the eBrains infrastructure today, which is what remains of the European Human Brain Project. So everywhere, but in Strasbourg. So as a matter of fact, in 2020, when I came as a fellow in Strasbourg, the computational neuroscience scene in Strasbourg was pretty much an empty scene. So in reality, this discipline was absent at the time. So previously, I had been in Göttingen or in Marseille, which are both the location of prominent computational neuroscience nodes through Europe and the world. And actually, arriving to Strasbourg was for me a bit puzzling because there wasn't really kind of a ecosystem around me that would have allowed me remaining connected to the computational neuroscience community despite very interesting experimental collaboration opportunities that Strasbourg was offering. And I must say actually that USIAS, I used USIAS. I was a bit egoistic in the sense that I used the opportunity that USIAS offered me to experiment. Yes, can I really come to this place? And actually, USIAS was really instrumental in giving me the opportunity to experiment, to see how attractive was a community that was poorly visible from outside. So for me, it has been really the key instrument of attractiveness, actually. And indeed, after this test period, I liked it so much that I remained, and with CNRS, I created a new team with my former CNRS, with my former local host, Romain Goutagny. And now this team is developing into a much broader network of local collaborations, both with other neuroscience institutes, but also with a hospital, clinical hospital. And we are bringing, thanks to what was bootstrapped by USIAS, the computational neuroscience teams in Strasbourg to be inserted in big national networks such as the PEPR Santé Numérique, but also more international networks such as collaboration with Freiburg and beyond. Okay, so this was my intro. So now you know what is computational neuroscience and how USIAS has been important for me. So let me tell you then now something finally about my actual USIAS project and what we did with it. And this background is not just a decoration, but it is actually my USIAS project. It's the motivation of my USIAS project. So I want to ask you whether you know, whether you can guess what this picture is. If you know it, please be silent. If you've seen it already, don't break the surprise. So don't be shy. Everybody has spoken a lot, but you didn't speak a lot because you cannot ask questions. Do you have any idea? What is this?
It's a butterfly wing.
It's a butterfly wing. Maybe with a bit of imagination there could be one, but I'm not sure. Any other ideas? How this image has been constructed? Don't be shy. You are more shy than usual students. We can have one or two propositions and then I will reveal the mystery. It's God. Well, maybe. Yeah, there is a godlike character somewhere hidden in the upper left corner. Yeah, upper right corner. Map of Strasbourg. No, as a matter of fact, actually, this is the average frame of the Wizard of Oz movie, or at least of a 10-minute segment of it. So actually, here you see some kind of frames of this movie. You see the iconic yellow brick road in the center, the Emerald Castle in the upper right corner, the red poppy field. And actually, when you know it, you realize that looking at this average frame, you can identify indeed some of the elements I have named. But in reality, you can understand much better the story of this movie if you look at it frame by frame. And actually, that's pretty much the problem of neuroscience today, because in reality, most of the theories in neuroscience are constructed based on heavy averages over hundreds and hundreds of trials and measurements in neuroscience, or even different animals and so on. So in a sense, the variability between the scenes of a movie, which is the one carrying really most of the meaning of the story, is in reality usually lost into this massive treatment of the data that for sure clarifies the presence of some element, but also destroy information that could be important. So that's an example. For instance, in my research, I study a lot the role of oscillations in routing information across brain regions. And there are actually very influential theories, for instance, about how the hippocampus, the part of the brain devoted to memory, works, according to which you would have oscillations with different frequencies observed in different layers of this anatomical structure, and different oscillation will be associated to different functions in a very Cartesian one-to-one assignment between one well-defined process and another well-defined process. So if you look in the real data collected by my colleagues in Strasbourg, actually you can find traces of these nice slower rhythms in certain layers and faster rhythms in other layers, as you see from the spectrogram of recording in the hippocampus and the different position of the bands. But these actually are average activity maps. They are like the average frame of the Wizard of Oz movie. As a matter of fact, the behavior happens in the here and now of the present moment. You cannot wait to average over hundreds of slower oscillatory cycles in order to act. You need to act with the oscillatory activity that you have here and now. And here and now, it's a mess. There is a tremendous diversity, and it's quite difficult. You have oscillations at all the possible frequencies, at all the possible phases of this kind of slower reference oscillation. So in reality, the theories that are dominating the literature and the background are based on averages that do not correspond to the pervasive random-like irregularity that is present when not averaging. So on one side, we have very nice architectures, oscillatory architectures, oscillatory conceptual architectures based on averages that are as elegant as this beautiful neoclassic vision of the Library of the Louvre by Etienne Boulet. And it may look that when you refrain from averaging to look at the reality, these architectures are ruined as in this Hubert Robert painting. So however, by changing the way of looking at the data, are we really destroying this architecture? Or, on the contrary, are we trying to identify some more complex architecture that remain nevertheless functional despite its haphazardness? And here I'm putting the Louvre Abu Dhabi, the Louvre for the 21st century, conceived by Jean Nouvel as a metaphor for this. So actually, a large part of my USIAS project concerned the demonstration that this apparent noisiness of the real-time oscillatory behavior may be statistically random-like, but still provides a language enabling the decoding of behavior. Here specifically, it was the navigation of a mouse through the maze. We could actually basically from everywhere through the hippocampus decode the instantaneous position in the maze of a mouse exploring it from individual, irregular, random-like oscillatory events. And this proved basically that, and actually we had other studies in the conceived through, initially not planned, but conceived through the USIAS period, looking at similar situations. Actually, with Philippe Isop at Neurostra, we also look at the relation between cerebellar synaptic changes and the capacity of motor recovery of mice experiencing lesions in the leg, in the movement. And once again, actually, it was the complexity of these synaptic maps, not their average behavior, that happened to be the best predictor, the best architectural correlate, but in a weird architectural sense, enabling the prediction of behavior. So in other words, so weirdness is not established as randomness, but as a complex language, whose meaning is basically destroyed when attempting to tidy it out. So actually, if you take this Chinese character as a metaphor and you sort them out, basically you turn this message into trash, which is appropriate because Chinese-speaking person among you, and there are, will be able to read that here is written, do not litter. Okay. So basically what is trash here is the sorted out complexity. But this complexity is, this irregularity of the characters, different from the Cartesian sorting, is what carried the meaning. Okay, so this was a highlight of some of the work we performed in the USIAS. And basically, some of the work we started toward the end of the USIAS project is constituted now, developed now in one of the principal lines of our team, and I will conclude briefly with one of our last studies. So actually, randomness and variability obliges us to consider the state of the brain in flow, like the frames of a movie, without freezing them into an artificial stillness that derives from the averaging. So actually we know that flows can be more or less fluid. We may have actually liquid, smoothly flowing water or viscous fluids that evolve more slowly. So in reality, this metaphor of fluidity, actually we apply to the flow of the brain states, result in the present moment. And we are actually able to measure this fluidity of my brain states and also to model their origin. And actually we have been, thanks to an experience and a competence, a skill that I could not have acquired elsewhere than in Strasbourg, at least in France, thanks to the local skill in developing transgenic models of various mouse models of various pathologies. Actually, we've been investigating both with EEG and fMRI, so the fluidity of the evolution of brain state in Alzheimer mice, that at a very young age, much younger than the age at which a human patient usually go to the doctor with a suspicion of Alzheimer's disease arriving, actually, exhibit already some kind of mild cognitive deficit. And interestingly, actually, as you can see, that's complicated, but basically I invite you to look at these croissants that correspond to some kind of dimensionally reduced representation of the space of possible states that the brain can explore. And to note that the wild-type mouse explore this continent with large fluidity in yellow, while the Alzheimer mice explore essentially the same continent, but at a much lower speed. So basically the difference between the control conditions and the pathology is not in what are the states explored, but in how fluidly we explore them, which is something that could not be measured without this time-resolved, not averaged method that we developed. And also we can see that some novel promising treatment that restore the memory performance by flashing lights with a suitable schedule without any medicament to the mice also restore the fluidity. Okay. So, and we also try using computational models to understand the origin of all these, actually, and this was also originated in the USIAS, but the time is getting short. So we hope that in the future, this kind of computational models enable transforming these correlational observations of reduced fluidity into explanations of why certain treatment work and why fluidity is lost that can be used to identify novel target for pharmacological treatments. And stimulation also is a future application. So let's close. So I hope that despite the short time and the compression, I've been able to show you that computational neuroscience, and specifically our studies, require an interdisciplinary blend in order to tame complexity. And that's not just a game of physicists. It really looks like complexity is what makes our behavior and our mind complex in reality. So, and last word, this complexity, this blend is precisely the one that USIAS is proposing still today, had proposed for me, keeps proposing thanks to my participation to seminars about disciplines which are not at all mine, but I would like becoming mine after listening to marvelous science. And therefore, I want to thank you for attention, but also USIAS for having been able, attracting me and still giving me pleasure to remain here. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Demian. And last but not least, we have a presentation on glaciares by Olaf Eisen, who's a USIAS Fellow 2021 from the University of Bremen, right? Also. Yes, also, yes. Okay. Nouveaux, partenariats, Vérités, glaciaires.
And I also will speak in English because it's better for your ears than having me speak in French with a stronger German accent than before. But you're in PDF now? It was PowerPoint before? Oh. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Well, there's a PowerPoint above. You numbered it 6 slides, Eisen, yeah. Anyway, will do. All right, so finally we also close with a natural science topic, environmental sciences. I'm a glaciologist from the Alfred Wegener Institute, the German Center for Polar Research, not only dealing with glaciers, but mainly with ice sheets. And one of the subtitles of this talk is about new partnerships. And as you see here, although we started out in a small group within EOS ITES at the University of Strasbourg, funded by USIAS, it turned out that in order to solve this problem, we had to involve many more partners because we found something we did not anticipate. But in this way, we also actually did what we consider USIAS is aiming for, to really explore new angles, new routes, and also have some new intellectual and exceptional challenges. And that's what we had, which is not always pleasant because it also gives you headaches. And I hope to explain you on one example here what we did with those and what we ended up with. For ours, it was really important that USIAS has the feature of testing the unknown, so not only go small steps to proceed where you were before, but really also try something new and be able to go into something unexpected, and at the same time also expect that something doesn't work, but also be able to rebuild this in order to get success, and also build new bridges and rebuild old ones. Actually, glaciology has been in Strasbourg already in the 20th century, but then with people aging and retiring and not being replaced, it kind of tapered out. So we kind of also got back to that tradition. Why are glaciers important? That brings us to the human dimension, which the previous speakers showed. This is a scenario for 2100 in less than 75 years. Different scenarios. You see the sea level in meters on the vertical, and then the years, and these are different scenarios for how much CO2 we put into the air. And then there are worst case scenarios which are dashed here, which apply to each of these scenarios. And the worst case is coming from things we don't know yet. This doesn't look too bad, 0.5 meter to 1 meter, but if you go into the larger scale until 2300, and you know that what we do in the next 75 years is affecting potentially 630 million people, and then what could happen by 2300, we could have 10 meters of sea level rise, then you see that this is a different dimension, and we really have to understand what is happening in order to be able not only to mitigate, but in the worst case also to adapt. So that's where the societal impact is coming from. One of the sites we tested was an ice stream on the Greenland ice sheet. Ice streams are the arteries of the ice sheets. They export very fast, in a very fast way, ice from the interior. You see here at the start to the coast. This is a northeast Greenland ice stream. They flow between 50 meters per year inland and then reach up to 4 or 5 kilometers per year at the coasts. And then they calve and bring the ice into the ocean. When they are in balance, then there's no problem. But if they're out of balance and they produce more icebergs or more melting, then is replaced by accumulation, then they're producing sea level rise. One of the things which is not understood is why are current models, ice flow models, so mathematical physical models of the ice streams, not able to reproduce what we see from satellites. So here you see the surface velocity color-coded, and what the model does is okay-ish, but not really good. And one of the things we found is that normally glaciologists model ice as viscous. As the previous speaker said, viscous fluid, kind of flowing slowly, and it turns out this is not everything which counts, but also something else. And in order to understand the physics of the ice stream, we used the eScript Ice Core project, the big European ice core project, which was funded in 2016, drilling an ice core in the middle of this ice stream to understand the dynamics. And the project we envisaged in USIAS was basically about l'abri d'une carotte de glace. So when you're drilling an ice core, you hear the sound. And if you go to your kitchen and you're grinding a carrot with this kind of old-fashioned device, but still practical, you hear what's happening. And we wanted to hear what the drill is doing in the ice in order to analyze the noise we receive to deduce the physical properties. That was the idea. We also used distributed acoustic sensing, a relatively new method which uses fiber optic cables, so what everybody has now in their houses from Orange or whatever. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. And you have impurities in the fiber optic cable, so these are 2 millimeters in diameter. The outside, the inside is much more finer. And then you put a laser pulse into this cable, and then you receive the reflections from these impurities. And if you have a seismic wave or sound going through this fiber, it's moving a little bit. It's a sound wave which moves these particles, and then with the laser you can detect how much they moved. And that's basically, for geophysicists, a seismometer. And you can have that tens of kilometers long. And we put one of those fibers into the borehole. So here you see the borehole schematics, not reaching the borehole, the base of the ice stream yet. So this is the bed, this is the ice, and then the fern at the top and the surface. And we wanted to measure what we did at the surface in terms of noise with artificial explosions. And we also wanted to use that noise to understand how the wave propagates downwards. Here you see a science, the drill trench where the little hole is disappearing and the fiber in it, and on the right hand side you see the actual fiber. It's really thin, and in that case it was really 10 kilometers long, but just 1.5 kilometers were going into the hole. So it's kind of a delicate measurement. And what we got, I don't go into the details here, don't worry. Vertically you see the fiber optic cable with depth, and we got these signals which are seismic signals. We did all kinds of analysis, took a few years to get to the end, and we came up with some key findings. And what the nice thing this displays here is that you have some ice quake, so where the ice is moving it makes sound, so this is natural environmental noise, just like doing something like this. And that creates a wave which goes up in the ice. So here's the length of the cable, this is the depth, this is time, sorry. So it's moving up and it stops and moves again and stops and moves again, and it stopped at those places where we had, from the ice core we know that, impurities in the ice, like sulfates from past volcanic eruptions. And we didn't really understand it. So it's kind of, again, as the previous speaker had, we have to decode the signal to understand what is actually happening. And another thing we found is these signal stopped at a depth of around 900 meters below the surface. So we could not measure them at the surface. And that's something also totally unexpected. So actually putting this fiber in the borehole and just listening for 14 hours, what is the ice doing, was really luck for us, because we cannot receive it in a different way. What people did before at the surface, this does not work because of the physical properties. So then, as natural scientists are, they observe something, they try to put that in a model. That's what you see here. I also spare you the details. You have some rupture initiation, like you have a little fracture at one piece of the ice, and then you move that up, and it's propagating, and it turned out this is a cascade. So you move something somewhere, and then that creates a wave, and that also creates another ice quake further up, and also further down. So up here are the observations, down here are the models, and you see that kind of looks okay-ish. Very good reproduction, so we are confident that the model works. It's basically like a pile of sand. You start to take some sand away at the bottom, and then something accelerates up, and the whole thing will start to slide, like an avalanche. The important thing is that over 14 hours, we had 2 major events we observed, which basically repeated themselves. And these events produced a very small movement of the ice. So that's what we call strain. But if you extrapolate it to a full year, this is a considerable amount of the movement of the whole ice sheet in this part. So 50 meters per year could be reproduced by 100 of those large events, which we observed, of which we observed 2 in 14 hours. So we think that this phenomenon is important for ice stream deformation and might be the missing link why the observations are not really reproduced by the models at this stage. And that's something we consider to be brittle failure. So it's kind of something which was postulated before but never observed on an ice stream scale, because you're just talking about hundreds of meters, nothing you reproduce in a laboratory. This was published 1 year ago, talking about impact. These are 2 of the co-authors. On the right-hand side, you see Dorte Dahl Jensen, one of the most famous glaciologists in the world, from Copenhagen. And they were really happy when we received the message that this was accepted for publication. And over 1 year, we had about 7,000 downloads, which for glaciology is really a lot. For medicine, it's kind of, yeah. For us, we're not more than 1,000 people globally. That's really important. So it really shows that people really pick that up and will have an impact over the next years. Takes a while still. So what we wanted was to listen to the noise of an ice core drill, drilling an ice core, and then using active shots at the surface to understand what happened. But we got something else. This didn't work. However, we got is the recording of the groaning of the ice stream while it's flowing slowly over the ground, and how it's deforming internally and really having these micro cracks which might add up to the full displacement. We were also surprised to see that the sound is stuck in the ice. We still not really understand why that is the case. There are some postulations, but we have to consider further investigations. And this is basically something we postulate as a new deformation mechanism, which has to be investigated in the future to see how well the models can still be improved. So because of USIAS, University of Strasbourg and especially EOS-ITES became members of two ice core drilling consortia. One of the biggest ones right now is beyond Epica and Antarctica, which will terminate this year, and then the follow-on project will start. We were able to establish new partnerships with all kinds of countries, including also Australia, for example. And we also were able to continue with this research. But it will also give headaches to especially ice flow modelers, because they have to see how can we incorporate that into our current models. Glacial truth is a multi-layered problem, and as I showed before, we are actually talking about societal challenges. And one thing is about how do you communicate the inconvenient truth? For decades, climate scientists, environmental people like me have been talking about this is a threat, you have to do something, so kind of doomsdayism, which is real, but people don't want to hear that. So we have to try to find a different language, and that's something where I was really appreciating how USIAS works, that I could meet other people here who have a different angle on things and also talk in a different way. And also being outside of our own disciplines, our own silos, and outside of an ivory tower. So basically, it helped me really to learn another language, which I think is important to communicate what is at stake with climate change, to finally convince also the society. Another way to talk about this is happening tonight. What about the arts? We talked about humanities and natural sciences, so how about arts? And if you see here, they are reinterpreting the Four Seasons from Vivaldi. It's happening tonight in the Orangerie in 1900. But it's about the uncertainties. So here, musicians use climate records from Iceland and other places to bring them into the sound of Vivaldi. So that's another way to inform the public and really educate also the public that nothing is really separated, but how you can integrate all the different aspects, natural sciences, social sciences, and also the arts together in order to bring over the message. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussions afterwards.
Thank you so much, Olaf, and I would like to invite all the speakers here on the stage for the final discussion. I know that Marion had to leave, and also Wipke had to leave. N'hésitez pas à poser vos questions en français et en anglais. Le but de ces échanges est de réfléchir ensemble à l'USIAS, au rayonnement de l'USIAS, à l'avenir de l'USIAS à partir des discussions, des projets, des présentations des projets que nous avons vus. Use the button. What button? The audience when they speak. Yes. All right, so thank you very much to our speakers. I think that you've done very well with this mission impossible that I was mentioning in my opening remarks. We have about 20-25 minutes for a discussion, and then I will invite the chairs of the USIAS up front so that they can say a few words in conclusion. So the floor is open for questions, please.
Yeah, I have a question. It's very interesting talks. I just found a similarity between the last talk about noise and not the average flow, but you're going into noise, the brain research, and what Cyriac was talking about, that thermodynamics is normally just a macroscopic average, and you are looking in detail. And I wonder if that stimulated your thoughts in between each other when you heard each other, because that's what struck me. There's some overlap there in thoughts.
I can answer. Yes, indeed. I was wondering what types of noise spectrum you have when you hear this.
Maybe a related. Maybe a related question also. I was inspired. So in neural activity, we also have these avalanches, because when neuron fires, you have actually, like in the sand pile, other activity. So if you look at the distributions, whether they contain some avalanche-like exponents.
And indeed, that's also what I thought when I heard the previous two talks. It's all kind of related, but in a totally different discipline. So it's really great to have this exchange, which normally, if you do your personal discipline conference, it doesn't really work. That's definitely something to do in the future, to look into things. And there are examples where, for example, in glaciology, the crash of a glacier, like last year in Blatten in Switzerland, and the crash of stock markets, and giving birth to children, have all the same mathematical description. And this is really something where the disciplines can learn from each other and really use generalizations in order to improve the own field. So that's exactly one of the values you really see in these collaborations. And with the seminars, we have really a good opportunity to listen to each other and also learn something completely new, which I enjoyed very much over my 2 years here.
Thank you.
Yes, I join also everybody to congratulate you. But I had a question which it might not be very clear. I'll try to do it. Most of your talks you stressed about the input of the USIAS was to gain interdisciplinarity context and to meet people that you didn't meet before and to try to set up new bridges. My question is, what was it by chance? Was it because there were some devices within USIAS that fostered this? And third, why only USIAS? Why not in the whole university? Because USIAS is still a small club, which is by design. So this is not a negative point. How does it spread to the rest of the university? This capacity of making bridges where you were not suspecting them or not wanting to do them. Maybe. Thank you.
I'm not sure it works. This might be a dark spot on the overall picture, but I'm not sure it works this way. Maybe USIAS is a small club where that is at in the margin of the university. For example, to take just one example, in digital humanities, in the humanities, if we take the digital turn, we need to hire research assistants because we cannot be specialists in our field and be technicians. But the tradition is to hire professors and researchers in our field, and there is it's difficult to convince that maybe we would need to change and to make a shift and hire research assistants as well, because we're doing research in another way, and the message is maybe it just needs time. I mean, it's 14 years. It's not such a long time, but this is an ongoing process. It's not. I'm not sure it's working yet.
I can offer a slightly different perspective, which is, I think, because we do not need for Marion and I to hire digital researchers. But we came to one another through international colleagues who connected us. But to answer the question about how does that collaboration extend into the university, of course, I am concerned for my university as well. And we have discussed teaching our students together. Next year, this year I am in Strasbourg, next year I will be in New Jersey, but we will exchange lectures because the broadest differences between us could benefit our students tremendously. So one answer we have developed is to share that collaborative growth in teaching.
So on my side, So I met my future USIAS host in scientific conferences. That's important. So physical mobility, of course, that still is important with respect to online conferences. But the USIAS really was, for me, the opportunity of freeing time to really meet this colleague. So I think that the USIAS fills the role of one of the roles of advanced studies institutes that you mentioned before, precisely because it gives you the freedom to spend time on new ideas and new questions. So it sparkled an interest, because actually now my host is more Taliban about neural complexity than I am myself. And we created the summer school now. So actually we're trying teaching these computational methods to the Master 2 students and to the first year graduate students. So in reality, it had a real impact and now goes beyond the USIAS. And it would not exist without the USIAS, I think.
Yeah, maybe I start. So I think really, first of all, congratulations. I think fantastic work and publications in science. Recruitment to Strasbourg really shows the level of excellence here presented today. And I have one specific question. Within USIAS, we aim always to fund projects which are out of the box, which are not basically can be funded by a classical European Union grant or national grant. And I just wanted to ask you your personal experience to maybe explain us what's unique about the USIAS is what you cannot do, for example, by a classical grant, and how that contributed to your work.
Maybe as far as my experience is related to this point, indeed, this possibility given by an institution like USIAS to, as you say, to play outside the box is very rare. Usually when we submit projects, we have to bring a proof of principles or preliminary results. And this is not demanded by USIAS. So I guess the work of the referees also is very much polarized by this point. You have to explain to your pool of referees how the system works, but it's clear that it's absolutely unique. And then you start to dare things, new things. This is also maybe a component of freedom. And this is really radically different from what we have even at the European level, where they found blue sky research. It's never exactly blue sky research. You have to prove that you are competent. Well, in the kind of questions we have been all asking in our USIAS project, we see that there is always a side where we are totally ignorant. And that's nice, because we turn around the mountain, so to say. So, yeah.
Just as a follow-on there, I am on one of the ERC committees, and exactly that thing, there's a pilot study missing, so we will not use that one, we use another one. And what I just showed here, this is now the hypothesis you could build something on, but it wouldn't have not been possible to postulate that a priori and then apply for or build a project. You can do that now, but not before, and that's something I think is really a big advantage. You kind of have to know the material, what's possible, but not like that dedicated into deliverables and milestones and all that. So,
thank you.
Yeah, so I'm quite old USIAS scholar now, because so I'm a quite old USIAS scholar already, because my period was 16-17. But from that period, and that's a question I would have for you, because you discovered, to take up your question, that when you set up new projects like ANR or ERC, that you do have actually colleagues in USIAS, which can be very, very helpful. So maybe interdisciplinarity or enrichment of the field is not yet as present as you would like it to be, but that comes later, at one moment when you come back to it. And there, I think, discussing with some of my fellow colleagues, I think the USIAS, one thing that makes it really standing out is the fact that it does not only pay stipend to the researcher, but also replaces the money at the university, and that is very, very important, and not always the case in other institutes for advanced studies.
Yes, buying teaching, right?
I'm referring to your talk, the last one, and you know that there are about 14 different crystal structure of ice. Is it possible to use acoustic measurement to determine the kind of structure composing the ice? This could be of interest for people climbing in mountains, because depending on the structure of the ice, you don't climb the same way. What we call blue ice, black ice, white ice, etc.
Okay, that's very specific. So in terms of crystal structure, the only thing we care about on Earth is 1H, so hexagonal structures. And that's basically what we have. Unless you're really high in the atmosphere, you cannot climb anymore, and really in the atmosphere, not on the ground. But you could use these methods to determine the type of ice on other planets, where there's a different pressure, different gravity, all these. But we can also use these methods to determine, is there a lot of debris in the ice, for example, sediments in training, or are there crevasses, or are there maybe other failures? For example, if you traverse Greenland or Antarctica, you don't want to be with a big vehicle on a crevasse, so you use these geophysical methods to see, is there something in front of you, a crevasse you see with a radar, and you stop in time and then investigate further.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentations. And my question would be something related to what Rachel actually started with, and which I know is relevant to many scientists here, including Olaf, for example, the question of engagement of a scientist with the object he researches. So how far are we today from the classical perspective of a scientist who is an emotionless tool, who shouldn't have any ties with the research subject? Do we observe a change in the approach in the research at this level?
I think there are other people on this panel who will have perspectives on this also. Of course, with 15 minutes, all of the details disappear. And my experience is that the answer to this question varies tremendously by discipline. Even to still use a very broad example, the difference between people doing cognitive neuroscience in a laboratory and the type of relationship they must develop with their emotional bond with the animals they work with, which is always present, is quite different from people who primarily do field observation. And yet they both manifest as scientists to someone who is outside of their fields. So it's not really an answer at all. But my sense is that that question of emotion and how we engage with it depends so much on your teachers, on your traditions within publication. The examples that Marianne looked at, which are from the 1930s, were examples where this rupture was very, very strong. But the researchers she studied would go home and describe emotional anguish to their lovers, perhaps, but not to their colleagues about the animals they worked with. One of the reasons I think this work has been particularly fruitful for me is because in the field of music studies, part of what we always assume is that your emotions matter, because that is what we experience when we listen to music. So I think it depends on historical context, but also really very much, I think the answer to your question depends on the type of people you work with in your field.
I don't know if this is really an answer to your question, but your question makes me think about something. So maybe the emotion concerned by in my answer is joy, and the behavior causing it is curiosity. So I think that one of the characteristics of scientists that I met at USIAS is probably an above average or particularly intense curiosity. So I think that the exercise of going once per month to a seminar about a discipline which is not at all your one, with all the busy schedules that all of us have and so on. After a while, you say, should they really go to listen to this seminar about epistemology or animal studies and so on? But then you go and you enjoy it, and you really come up happy, and you are happy also meeting other curious scientists, and that's community building behind the traditional walls. And one day maybe I will need some tool, and I will remember that I met a friend that was in this meeting, and I will have something to go to, and that's really what can change everything. My fluidity measure in brain activity comes from climatology, and I met him not at USIAS but in another similar endeavor, which is very rare. So having a place like a genuinely multidisciplinary institute like USIAS can really create a generation of scientists with a lot of joy from curiosity.
Yeah, so maybe I will join you in exactly this remark, and also as a kind of answer to the question that you have asked about what made it so special with USIAS. So you, Alain Barrette, you are mentioning this delicate balance between too much structure, in a sense, and then complete freedom. And I would say that USIAS is not just, of course, it's first a community of people, yes, but it's also an organization. So it brings structure. So all these activities that were mentioned, and Demian mentioned the USIAS monthly fellow seminar, these are of paramount importance. And we would not have them if there was not the structure that would take care of organizing it. We're all very open, we're all very curious, yes, but we need this important help. This could not happen without structure, and I mean organizational structure.
Yes, following, well, I like very much all your talks, and following a bit Alain's questions, we created 4 years ago, University of Strasbourg, interdisciplinary thematic institutes, and it's a strong, there are strong communities around in different domains. I was a bit curious if you had the opportunity during your project maybe to get into work with some of those institutes, and eventually I was also curious if you had recommendation to how would you position USIAS type of project with respect to this. I know some of you know the interdisciplinary thematic institute very well. So how would you position USIAS with respect to those institutes? And eventually, what would be your recommendation for of course, you are in different domains, and I would guess that if you are making experiments, you need some kind of lab. You mentioned that you might need some numerical support. So how would you, what would be nice to have in this fellowship as a support with respect to your area of research in the future? So different questions.
I think so. I'm part of ITI, this interdisciplinary thematic institute, which is also part of this IDEX structure of the university. It is interdisciplinary, but it is also thematic, and so USIAS has this unique, let's say, unique frame where we really meet people from every field, every fields of research, and that you can find at the university. We've been stressing the monthly seminars. It's absolutely central for the pleasure we take in meeting all us around a table. We have had recently a talk on sur la sûreté en montagne. It was really, I mean, these are unique events and unique opportunities for us to discuss. Then I would say the framework of an ITI is, of course, there are diversity in the way ITIs are organized. So speaking from my side, we have also an ITI project calls, a yearly project calls, but it is not at all in the same spirit of USIAS. It is conventional. It is really conventional. We go beyond what we have been doing, but still on the same plane. If I take an optical analogy, USIAS really increases the F number. We can shift gears, we can shift planes, and we do this within a community of fellows that is growing ever and ever more importantly after years. And so there is a sense of, for me, this is what I wanted to stress, this proud of being part of the university is really also on this side. We not just focusing on what I know to do, but also being able to connect. And so I don't want to monopolize the microphone, but for me it's very important that this tool has to be distinguished and saved from the ITI orientations.
Yeah, so I totally agree. It's exposure to excellence across all teams. So that's really the key point. ET are not all teams. Actually, USIAS may be a model or even an instrument for putting the different ETs in dialogue between them. So maybe it is true that the interaction with the other structures in the university could be stronger, and maybe there could be a larger opening of the USIAS activity really targeted to meeting between ETs on specific topics. Maybe there is a war to make, but they are not a replacement of each other, and probably USIAS can help the structuring of bridges between the institutes.
I can only speak for myself, but I can certainly say that my experience here, which has been wonderful, has been that the freedom of not feeling pressure to produce a particular result has been unique. And it has also aided tremendously in the collaborative aspects, because I was brought in to work specifically with someone I did not know here. And to be able to have open and genuine conversations at the very beginning of our collaboration pushed our work so much farther, so much faster. It's not something I have experienced before, and I certainly I just gave a lecture 2 weeks ago at Princeton University, the arch alternative to the institute here. And, they are calling me to present this work to them because of what we are doing here. So it really made a tremendous difference, that freedom without that kind of pressure between driven people, I think, makes a difference. And I also just wanted to say that I cannot imagine having done this without the collaboration of an internal faculty member who also has that freedom. That really helped me grow a lot. So I'm very, very, very grateful for that as well.
Yes, a few years back when there was the call to contribute to the ITI groups, I made a choice not to try to join any of them, although I decided to apply for USIAS a few years before. And one of the ideas was that what I thought was thrilling when I thought of applying to USIAS was the fact that I could try something new, and this out of my comfort box. But if I'm going to be part of ITI, I'm going to say, hey, I'm comfortable on this topic and I can bring this to the group. I think it's a very different input. It's not that ITI is wrong and that USIAS is right, not at all, but that it's a very different perspective. I mean that I was curious about trying to work with text differently, and I could not come and knock at the door where they were looking for experts and say, can I try that? would you accept me in your group? I'm not an expert. I just want to make a try and see what comes out of it. That's what I did with the USIAS, and it was great. And also, because the USIAS is growing year after year, Rivka would tell me, oh, have you heard about that project? You might find interesting things in it. Maybe you could contact them, or she was the one who pointed me. She invited me to come to the Misha and meet with people who could help me. So it was very important to be able to shift also perspective. I mean, after 3 months, I realized that I needed texts, and I was not prepared for that. But it meant that it would take longer because I had to postpone the experiments that I was going to do. I had to, or do it on a small corpus and try to use it on a bigger corpus afterwards. And this was possible because we're free here. It's very experimental, and it's possible to invite people from the outside, and there's a lot of people coming from the outside and people from within, and we meet all together. So it's a place of circulation of knowledge, if I can say it this way. So that's what I thought was very important for me at the USIAS.
Knowledge fluidity.
Yes.
That would be a beautiful way to end this discussion, but if somebody has one final question, feel free to ask it before we invite the chairs up here. One last question? No? So we end on the fluidity of knowledge. Thank you very much to our speakers.